Hey there and welcome in. Today we're going to be going over demo number 11, which is all about complex form number 3, building with coils. So as we know from our prior demos, coils are essentially long strands of clay. They can vary in thickness as well as length. However, the thickness of your coil, it can be very, very thin. There's no limit to that. However, you do not want your coils to be excessively thick. As we've now learned, clay can never be thicker than 3/4 of an inch, or it's likely to have some issues in the kiln. The only one exception in which you can maybe make a coil slightly thicker than 3/4 of an inch is if you planned on building with it, which I'll show you shortly, and pinching it, which eventually makes it thinner. One example is with this large planter here. It's currently unfinished, so there's still more work to be done, but the basic shape has been formed to it. So essentially what happened is, as I was building this with coils, after each coil I would pinch it, which would make it thinner to follow our clay thickness rule. So anyhow, why would you ever need to build with coils, right? Can't we just take a huge mound of clay and start morphing it and pushing it into this shape to create this bowl? Why do we need to use coils? Well, if you were to just start forming it and pushing it, kind of like making a giant pinch pot, it's likely to fall apart. What would happen is the weight of these sides would be so weak that it would fall apart and collapse under its weight. Now, if you build with coils, you're most likely building a much stronger project that can handle an immense amount of weight. With that reasoning, whenever you're building something excessively tall or excessively large in general, you're going to want to use the coil building method. That way, your clay will not collapse under the weight of itself. So I'm about to show you the process that we use to build with coils. In essence, how it works is we start with a flat piece of clay on the bottom, and then we stack coils around the piece upwards, and then we create our project. It's up to you if you want to blend the coils together or not. In this project that I did, that you're going to shortly see how I made it, I did choose to blend the coils. My entire project is probably about 1/2 inch thick throughout. It is not done yet. I have made the basic form of it, but from this point on, once it's leather hard, I can attach items to it, decorations to it. I can throw in some textures. I can adjust the top lip. I can do a ton of stuff to it, but I'm gonna wait until it's more leather hard to start refining it a bit. So, all right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and get started talking about how we can build with coils. So there's several steps to building with coils. Today, what I'm going to demonstrate making is a flower pot. The first step you're going to want to do is to make a base for your project. Now, if you're planning on having a project that doesn't have a bottom to it, then technically you don't need to do this part. But I'm assuming you'll be creating a base or pot or something to that effect, and you're going to want to make a base. So you'll first need a base. This is my base. I made this one by hand just by pushing the clay down to make it flat. It has a somewhat natural look to it since I did not run it through the slab roller. I'm also making sure that my clay is no thicker than 3/4 of an inch to follow our standard rules. So this is going to be the bottom of my flower pots. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to roll out a coil, which I'm going to stack on top of that. All right, so next I'm going to add this on top of my base. To do that, I'm going to follow our standard score, slip, stick, smooth process. So I'm going to score the entire top edge of my base, I'm going to score the surface of the, well, first, hold on. Let me make sure that my coil is going to fit well around this. And it will. I'm gonna have actually some excess. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just gonna make a ramp for this excess to keep on going up. Some people like to make it clean cycles, so they'll have one big loop, make sure it's cut and even. I like to utilize all of the coil that I have. I'll do that after I score and slip. Okay, so I'm going to score the whole bottom surface of this coil that's going to attach on there. And I've now scored one side of my coil. Now I'm going to apply slip to both my scoring on my slab edge and the scoring on my coil. Okay, now I have slip on my coil as well as on my base. I'm now going to follow it with the stick step. Notice how I'm placing my coil slightly on the outside edge of my base. The reason is, as I'm building this, I want my planter, my pot, to start curving outwards, which means I have to make sure that each of my coils are slightly more on the outside of the base or the coil below it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off this end at a slope. See how I did that? What that does is it helps build a slope for the rest of my coil to just keep climbing upwards. Not everyone chooses to do that. I like to do it because it saves me time. I don't have to completely redo this extra piece of the coil. I can just continue building with it. So I'm getting some scoring and slipping going right below this extra area. And attaching. Making sure that it starts going outwards. I actually made a template. So how this works is essentially I just took a piece of cardboard and I cut out what I want my sides to look like. That way, as I build, I can set this next to my project and see if it's coming along correctly.